For cricket fans in the 2000s, Sachin Tendulkar was God. And if you wanted to represent, this is the car that you did it with. The Palio S10, complete with the god of cricket's signature. Back in the early 2000s, Fiat was on fire. Sales of the Palio had rocketed, and that put boosters under Fiat India's backside. They did what was only natural when you have massive marketing budgets. They signed on a very expensive brand ambassador who also happened to be a hardcore car enthusiast, Sachin Tendulkar. Sachin, he put his signature on the bonnet, on the flanks, on the boot, and in return, he got the keys to the 10th Palio S10. He also got the keys to a red Ferrari 360 Modena, which incidentally was given to him by Michael Schumacher. The 2000s were a great time for Fiat in India as well as globally. Ferrari, they were creaming everybody in Formula 1, and Michael Schumacher's car had big, bold Fiat branding on the side. In India, sales had finally picked up and the Palio was doing well. They had the full range, a 1.2 petrol, a 1.6 petrol, a 1.9 diesel. They had the Palio hatch. They had the Sienna, the sedan, which eventually became the Petra. They had the Weekend, which was the Estate, and that spawned this, the Weekend Adventure, which arguably is the most exclusive Fiat ever to be sold in the country. Fiat were also responsible for giving India its most popular engine, the 1.3 Multijet Diesel. It obviously went into the Palio and the entire Fiat India range, but it was also licensed to Maruti Suzuki. That went as the 1.3 DDIS into the entire Maruti Suzuki range and became super popular. And before we end this video, we will spin the tires on this, the Abarth. Now, before Hyundai became the N-Line, before Tata brought in the JTP, Fiat brought in their Go Faster brand, Abarth. This looked cool, this went hard and fast, this was also mechanically upgraded, and this marked the end of the Fiat story in India. Back in 2001, the only other car that made nearly 100 bhp was the Honda City. And then when Fiat brought in the Palio, they stuck not only a 1.2 litre petrol into it, but also the 1.6 litre petrol into the Palio GTX. And that put out 96.6 bhp, nearly 100 horsepower, which made it the second fastest car in the country after the Honda City. Fiat, they really loved us enthusiasts. They loved fast cars. The 15-inch alloys that you see here were an exclusive design for the S10, though I actually preferred the design on the GTX. In addition, there was a body-colored spoiler, side skirts, 6-speaker sound system, which was a novelty back then, driver's side airbag, a leather-wrapped steering wheel, and of course, Sachin's signature. This engine had a very different character to the Honda City, but it still loved to rev. Listen to it. Just listen to it. Of course, it's got an aftermarket air filter, but it's still such a cool car to drive. This is an enthusiast car, and only enthusiasts will still have this in their garage. (7,200 RPM or 7,100 RPM), but it goes over 7,000 RPM. Today you can't buy a car that does nearly 7,000 RPM. This is going to be a recurring theme in this video, but what a shame Fiat no longer there in India. The Palio was part of the 178 World Car Project, the first time Fiat set its ambitions globally rather than just for the Italian domestic market. The Palio was the first recipient of the scalable global architecture, which was derived from the Uno but beefed up for emerging markets. It was first launched in Brazil in 1996. Project 178 would span 4 body styles globally, including a pickup truck, the Strada. In India, it first appeared as the Sienna sedan in 1999, followed by the Weekend Estate and then the Palio hatchback. So that was the 1.6 engine, but let's just talk about the Palio. Now let's cycle back to the Honda City. What was great about the Honda City? It was extremely light, and the handling was not all that great because it had very soft suspension. The Palio was the complete opposite. This still feels like a current generation car in that robustness, in that solidity that this platform delivers. This Project 178 was actually designed for emerging markets. Brazil was the first market to get it, India, Africa. All those countries had very poor roads. So Fiat actually made a car that could last those roads, outlast in fact those roads. Today, if you go over bad patches of road, the Palio, it still takes it very well. This still feels like a very strong car, a car that can actually take a solid beating without giving you any complaints whatsoever. The steering was not too light, it was a bit heavy, but that made you feel connected to the car. The driving position is actually quite nice. The Palio, it was actually the first car that I road tested. I was doing road testing before that, but this was the first car that I actually did instrumented performance testing with at the VRD. So it'll always have a special place in my heart. Of relevance to India was that Fiat's 178 cars and the Tata Indica were both designed by the IDEA Design Institute in Turin, and the dimensions were almost identical. Of course, there is much more that goes into a car, and the Palio and Indica drove and felt very, very different. 0 to 100 in 12.3 or 12.5 seconds, top speed around 180 kilometers per hour, which was quick in those days. Remember, it was only when the Honda City VTEC came along, that's when the 0 to 100 times dropped below 10 seconds and we started crossing 200 kilometers per hour. So when it was launched, the Palio was a fast car. Now the Palio S10, what did they do to it? Well, on the inside, nothing really. This still retained that silver finish center console from the GTX. It still retained the white faced dials, which even today it looks cool, very cool. I would prefer these dials to any modern digital clusters, honestly. This is just so cool. What it did get was yellow. So it was strikingly yellow. It got a lot of Sachin Tendulkar badging. It came with a certificate of authenticity, and also a cricket bat which was signed by Sachin. But yeah, Fiat did go the whole 9 yards with the S10. Unfortunately, even though we were mad fans of Sachin Tendulkar, nobody really bought it. The S10, it was limited to 500 units and all cars had an individually numbered plaque on the boot. I think this car is 350 or 355, something I can't remember for sure. But it was limited to 500 units. And all 500 units did not sell out. In fact, the last cars, they were sold at a discount of 1.5 lakhs. And 1.5 lakhs discount is a lot when the car was some 6.5 lakh rupees. So even though we professed to be Sachin fans, we didn't put our money where our mouths are. We wanted fuel efficiency. And that's where the 1.2 litre engine, that did the volumes for Fiat. Would I recommend this car to an enthusiast on a budget? Definitely. Now, you got to remember, this is a 20-year-old car. In fact, it's celebrating its 20th anniversary now. It's a happy coincidence, but this Gone But Not Forgotten is dropping on the 20th anniversary of the Palio. So it is an old car, and that considered, there are going to be small little niggles that will keep cropping up. Any old car does deliver that. But otherwise, more or less, these cars are also reliable. Just give it attention, tender loving care, and it will go far. This car costs well under a lakh of rupees, and at this price, you're not going to get a faster car. This car, step on it, it will light the fires of the enthusiast. What fun. This has been amongst the most fun Gone But Not Forgotten episodes that I've done. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Back at the Auto Expo in 2002, the other car that Fiat introduced was the Palio Weekend. This is the step up on it, the Adventure, and it can rightfully claim to be India's first crossover. In the 2000s, estates were still a thing. In fact, Maruti and Fiat, they launched their estates at almost the same time. So Maruti launched the Baleno Alturas, Fiat launched the Sienna Weekend, both around the same time, and both really didn't meet with much demand or much response. Indians, we were never fans of estates. Maruti, they gave up very quickly, but Fiat, they persisted, they continued with it, and in 2003 they launched the Palio Adventure with the 1.9 diesel engine, and later on they launched the same Palio Adventure with a 1.6 petrol engine. Now the Palio Adventure, it was the weekend, but with raised ground clearance, all that paraphernalia that you see on the sides, all that cladding, the side steps, it had that bull bar on the front. Those days bull bars were still legal, now it is illegal, you can't fit in a bull bar on the front. It had those extra fog lamps and it looked really cool. It also had on-off-road tires. It was still front-wheel drive, so it didn't really have much off-roading ability, but those on-off-road tires would have given it slightly better grip off the road. When we drove it, we never tried it off-road, we drove it purely in the city. And the thing that really stood out was just how attractive it was. It turned heads everywhere. It got those roof rails, those double roof rails, which are unique. Even today, you don't see those double roof rails. And it was just a damn cool looking crossover. It was the first ever crossover, at least to the best of my memory, the first crossover in the country. So it was an estate, but styled to look sort of like an SUV with SUV-ish tires. Fiat did all of that back there. They were really ahead of the game. But it did not sell. Nobody really wanted a weekend, nobody wanted an adventure, and this is possibly the rarest Fiat that you can find. The 1.6 engine, well, like in the Palio, it moves, it loves to rev, it is a punchy, grunty, high revving engine, a fabulous piece. The rest of the car, well, this is a long car, there is a lot of space inside, but the handling, the ride, it's all sorted dynamically. Fiats were really sound. But the best part of this car will remain the way it has been styled. That's the reason why a lot of enthusiasts collect these things. They're very cheap, but you can't really find it because enthusiasts, they won't part with their Palio Adventures. On the inside, the Palio Adventure was no different from the regular Palio. It got the silver finish center console, but that's about it. I don't even remember if it actually got a music system. I think it might have got a music system, but those days we used to change music systems. We used to put what we liked or what we could afford. It was robust, it was built to last. These 178 platform cars were built for third world countries, so they were built to take a hammering. And even today, this is now what, nearly 18 years old? It's done 66,000 kilometers, or maybe it has gone round the clock also. And it's not squeaking, it's not rattling. I'm shocked. Going over a speed breaker, nothing is clanging. Unbelievable how these cars have lasted. The Adventure didn't help Fiat India sales, and that's when the great friendship between Tata Motors and Fiat Auto's head honchos, Ratan Tata and Sergio Marchionne, led to a rather unique partnership. In 2006, Tata Motors merged their 25 dealers with the remaining 3 Fiat dealers in India to create the Tata Fiat network, which retailed the Palio, Adventure, Indica, Indico, Sumo and Safari. Neither Tata Motors nor Fiat really benefited, and the distribution partnership ended 6 years later. But even today, Fiat's massive Ranjangaon plant making the Jeep Compass and the 2-liter diesel engine for the Compass, Tata Harrier, Safari, even the MG Hector is a 50-50 joint venture between what is now Stellantis and Tata Motors. And this very same factory made the legendary 1.3-liter Multijet Diesel for Fiat, Tata Motors and even Maruti Suzuki. Perhaps Fiat's greatest contribution to India. Fiat's greatest contribution to the Indian automotive industry has to be the 1.3-liter Multijet Diesel engine. Now, this was not just used in Fiat cars, it was also licensed out to Maruti Suzuki. Back then, General Motors, they had a stake in Fiat, they had a stake in Suzuki, and through the General Motors connection, Suzuki got their hands on this Multijet Diesel. In India, it was badged DDIS, it was first launched in the Swift, and post that, Swift sales took off, Maruti sales took off, Maruti began selling diesels like it was going out of fashion, and diesels became massively popular in India. Not only did Maruti productionize this engine in India, Fiat also made this engine in India and they sent it to Tata Motors. So this engine was also put into the Indica. So massive volumes for this engine. and not without reason, because this engine is brilliant. Now, in the early avatar of this engine, there was a fair bit of turbo lag. So until you got to 2200 RPM, there really was nothing in it. When you slow down for speed breakers, say if you stuck it only in second, it really waited, and then post 2.5, that's when this engine really began to move. And when it moved. This diesel engine also extremely fuel efficient. So you got 1,000,000 miles to the liter, you got massively good performance. It was noisy, it did have that gravelly diesel engine vibe to it, but it was fine. For the kind of efficiency and performance it delivered, we were absolutely alright. Absolutely happy with it. What am I saying? Alright. We were happy with this engine. The only reason why this diesel engine is no longer there is BS6 emission norms. Maruti found it too expensive, or maybe Fiat were charging Maruti way too much to upgrade this engine to BS6 norms. If they had, this engine would still be around and this engine would still be selling by the truckload. This 1.3 diesel was not the first Fiat diesel in India. Before that, we had the 1.9 diesel, but with this Palio Stile, which was the facelifted Palio, then they put in the 1.3 diesel, they put in the 1.3 diesel into the other cars also in their portfolio. But you know, the one thing that we all noticed, and back then all road tester commented on it, was that even though Maruti and Fiat were using basically the same engine, Maruti's tuning, their mapping of the engine was better suited to India. So their engine had a little less noise, a little less turbo lag, and a little more performance. I think the performance was down to the fact that the Swift is a much lighter car than the Palio. In terms of outputs, they were bang identical, but the Maruti diesel just sort of felt nicer and more refined, even though it was a Fiat engine, even though the technology was licensed from Fiat. But this engine, seriously, it is one of the great engines of all time. You talk about Ferrari engines being fantastic, and it's true, they are fantastic. But this engine, what it did for the mass market, what it did for regular enthusiasts on a budget, was unbelievable. Everybody loved this engine. In fact, Maruti later on even brought the 1.6 diesel into India, but that had terrific turbo lag. That was in the S-Cross, if you recall. Too much turbo lag, that didn't really take off, and Maruti never bothered productionizing it in India. The 1.3, it was enough. And if they had upgraded it to meet emission norms, it would still be around. We all should stand up and say thank you to Fiat for this engine, for giving India this engine. The Stile did get slightly updated styling on the outside, but the competition had moved on in all aspects, particularly so in the interior design. This car's done 1.5 lakh kilometers and it still moves eagerly. There's still a lot of grunt in the engine. You can still cane it. You can still cane an engine that has done 1.5 lakh kilometers. So post 2,500 RPM, that's when it really starts to pull, really starts to sing. And when it sings, it sings. The same 1.3 diesel then found its way into the gorgeous Linea sedan that was launched in 2009 and met with good initial response, even winning comparison tests against the Honda City. This was followed up by the even more attractive Grande Punto hatch, and then in 2010, the Linea got the 123 bhp T-Jet motor, the first turbo petrol engine in this class. And then came the Abarth story. Fiat had great plans for India. In 2010, they put the T-Jet engine into the Linea, and then they stuck the same T-Jet engine into the Punto. In fact, they even tweaked the engine, and that made for the Punto Abarth, India's first hottish hatch. Back then we had the Polo GT TSI, we also had the Baleno RS, and compared to both those cars, which also had turbocharged petrol engines, this was quicker, and quicker by a fair margin. It also got a manual gearbox. The GT TSI only got a DSG gearbox, and that made it great fun to drive. This was awesome. It did 0 to 100 in 9.8 seconds and it involved you. It really plugged you into the driving experience. Another reason why you were so plugged into the driving experience was the torque steer. There was plenty of it. So Fiat, obviously for Indian roads, they raised the ground clearance and that made the dynamics a little all over the place. So a fair bit of body roll. They also didn't give it meaty enough tires, just 195 section tires. Everybody who bought the Punto Abarth, they stuck on wider tires and better tires. In fact, when we tested it, we stuck on a set of Yokos and the handling was transformed. But still, you still had lots of torque steer, plenty and plenty of torque steer. Back then, even today, this gear shift is not nice at all. It's a little notchy. The clutch pedal is heavy. You really have to work this gearbox. The steering also, it's not fingertip light, but I like that about it because there is a lot of feel. This is hydraulic power steering, unlike all the electric power steering systems. And you really know what is going on at the front end. The steering wheel is really nice to grip and hold with nice extensions where your grips are. Looks nice, the cabin looks nice. The one problem with the Grande Punto, with the Linea, with this Punto Abarth was the driving position. So your hands are outstretched, but your knees are bent, plus the seats are not comfortable at all. I don't know who they designed this for. No normal human being has a proper posture or even height to fit comfortably into a Punto Abarth or even the Linea and the Grande Punto. And after a while, your back starts to hurt, you feel cramped. So basically, in the Punto Abarth, you just put your foot down and let this T-Jet engine, let the dynamics, let the handling, let all of it do its thing. So you just focus on the driving and forget about everything else. Forget also the fact that this engine, it drinks fuel like it's going out of business. One thing I'm sure you'll agree with me is that this Punto Abarth really looks good. Even today, if it were to go on sale, it would still be amongst the nicest looking cars. And this segment, it does not lack for new metal. It only came in white or black with this red Abarth stripes, the scorpion on the roof, Abarth on the side, red wing mirror caps, and no Fiat badges, only Abarth badges on the Punto Abarth. A really cool looking car. Italian design, this is what it was all about. This is what we miss now that Fiat is gone. We miss cool Italian cars. And the Punto Abarth, it backed all this styling with proper performance. Nothing in half measure. It was a proper fast car. Before any other manufacturer thought of bringing their go faster divisions, Fiat brought in Abarth. Their dealerships had a Abarth section and they put in a lot of time and effort. But what they did not put in was enough marketing behind the Abarth. Not too many people knew about it. People wondered why would they spend 10-12 lakh rupees on an Abarth, and that's a shame. This never sold. In fact, this was amongst the last cars to be bought. If you cycle back to 2019, there was a news story of 6 enthusiasts going to a dealership and getting a solid discount. So 6 Abarths were sold at one shot. They got a discount of 2.95 lakh rupees. Nearly 3 lakh rupees discount on a Punto Abarth. That's how cheap the last lot of Abarths were sold. And that's a shame. I believe not even 500 of the Abarths were sold, and that is including the Punto, the Adventura, what else, that Urban Cross that was there. All of that put together, less than 500 were sold. This car I miss. Cars like this I miss. It of course has its flaws, but this is an out and out enthusiast car. It was also mechanically beefed up with disc brakes all round, and it was a fun to drive car. But by then, the dealer network had given up on the Fiat story. So too had FCA, as they quietly tooled up the Ranjangaon plant for the Compass and pivoted to Jeep. And while Fiat haven't officially withdrawn from India, since 2019, no Fiats have been sold in India, and the legendary brand is as good as gone. And here's a visual representation of the pace of progress. The Palio S10 jumps the drag race and shoots off into the lead, but once the Punto Abarth gets on boost, it reels in the S10 and demolishes it. Nandas versus turbo petrol engines, the latter always wins. There is this general perception that Fiats aren't very reliable, that Fiat stands for fix it again Tony. But truth is, you speak to any Fiat owner and they'll tell you that the cars have been absolutely reliable. Just give it regular TLC, regular servicing, and they last. What Fiats aren't are very fuel efficient. Also, Fiat has never had a strong service setup in India, and that's probably where this whole perception of service and quality comes from. But Fiats have always been desirable. They've always been well stand. Look at the Palio. 20 years later, this still looks good. And the Punto Abarth, this is a very, very good looking car. And also, Fiats have had excellent ride and handling, robust feeling, great for Indian roads, great for us enthusiasts. In fact, Fiat, they've always had the back of us enthusiasts. And that's why it's such a shame that we don't have Fiat in India anymore.